She had never imagined that a single invitation could change everything. The letter arrived on a crisp morning, tucked neatly in a cream envelope with gold trim. The handwriting was elegant, looping across the page in a style that seemed almost from another time. She held it in her hands, heart racing, unable to believe that someone with so much influence had taken notice of her music. The invitation was for a private performance at a grand mansion, hosted by a billionaire known for his sharp mind and sometimes biting sense of humor. He was famous for hosting events where he tested the skills and courage of his guests, and she could not stop thinking about what that might mean for her. For weeks, she had been practicing tirelessly, honing every note, every pause, every expression that could bring her music to life. Her apartment was small, filled with the soft hum of her piano and the quiet sounds of the city outside. She often played late into the night, imagining an audience that could be moved by her music, that could feel every emotion she poured into it. But this invitation was different. This was real. The stakes were higher, and the audience was intimidating. She knew that performing in front of ordinary people was one thing, but playing for someone who had seen everything, who had a reputation for testing and mocking, was entirely another. She packed her sheet music carefully, folding it in a way that would keep it safe from the wind and her nerves. She had chosen a simple dress, elegant but not flashy, something that would let the music speak for itself. She had always believed that talent and passion mattered more than appearances, and tonight would be a test of that belief. She left her apartment, the city lights flickering as she walked, feeling a mix of excitement and fear. Each step felt like a drumbeat leading to a moment that could change her life forever. When she arrived at the mansion, she was taken aback by its sheer size and beauty. The driveway stretched like a river of light, lined with perfectly trimmed hedges and glowing lamps. The building itself seemed to shimmer in the night, with tall windows reflecting the warm glow of chandeliers inside. Valets in crisp uniforms opened doors and guided her to the entrance. Every detail spoke of wealth and power, and for a moment, she felt small, almost insignificant. But then she reminded herself why she was there. Her music, her skill, and her courage. The grand hall where she would perform was even more stunning than she had imagined. High ceilings, polished floors, and walls lined with art from all over the world created an atmosphere that was both intimidating and inspiring. A large piano sat in the center, gleaming under the lights. She could feel the weight of the room, the history, and the expectations all pressing on her shoulders. Guests were already mingling, dressed in elegant attire, their conversations a soft murmur that seemed to float through the air. She noticed the billionaire standing off to one side, observing quietly, a faint smirk on his face. There was an edge to his expression, a sense that he expected something amusing or perhaps even embarrassing to happen. She took a deep breath and reminded herself that she had faced nerves before, though never like this. She had played in recitals, competitions, and small gatherings, always feeling the rush of performance. But this was different. This was a room full of people whose opinions could open doors or close them forever. And at the center of it all was someone whose approval seemed impossible to earn. Yet, despite the fear, there was a spark of determination in her. She had worked too hard, sacrificed too much, to let doubt steal this opportunity. Backstage, she set up her sheet music and tested the piano keys, feeling the familiar weight under her fingers. The sounds resonated in the hall, echoing softly, a reminder of why she had chosen this path. Every note she played was a connection between her heart and the room, even before anyone had really listened. She closed her eyes for a moment, letting the music settle in her mind, imagining the story she wanted to tell through it. She didn't just want to play notes. She wanted to convey every struggle, every hope, every dream that had led her to this moment. As the time for her performance drew closer, she could feel the tension in the room. Guests were whispering, some curious, some skeptical. She overheard snippets of conversation, people questioning why someone so young and relatively unknown had been invited. The billionaire's gaze was on her, a subtle challenge in his eyes, as if he was silently asking, "Can she really do this?" She knew she had to answer that question not with words, but with her music. Finally, A staff member signaled that it was her turn. She walked toward the piano, each step echoing in the silent anticipation. The room seemed to hold its breath as she sat down, adjusted her sheet music, and placed her fingers on the keys. The lights were bright, the audience watching intently, but she let all of that fade into the background. This was her moment, a chance to show who she truly was through the language she loved most. She began to play softly, almost hesitantly at first, allowing the melody to flow naturally. The initial notes were gentle, drawing the listeners in, creating a quiet space where the music could speak. She could feel the eyes on her, the subtle shifts in posture, the quiet clearing of throats, and the held breaths. It was both nerve-wracking and exhilarating. She let her emotions guide her fingers, and the melody began to grow, rich and full, filling every corner of the grand hall. As she played, she noticed the reactions of the guests changing. A few who had looked skeptical now leaned forward, drawn into the music. Conversations stopped entirely. Even the billionaire, who had been watching with a smirk, leaned slightly, his expression softening, curiosity and surprise flickering across his face. She realized then that music had a power words could not reach. It connected people in a way that defied expectations, broke down walls, and reached the heart. The piano seemed to come alive under her fingers, each note a reflection of her dedication, her struggles, and her dreams. The hall was no longer just a room. It was a space of shared experience. She could feel the energy of the audience, the shift in their attention, the collective immersion in the story she was telling through sound. The nervousness that had gripped her earlier transformed into focus, a clarity that allowed her to pour everything she had into the performance. She continued to play, weaving a tapestry of emotion and skill, feeling the crescendo build naturally. The music told of hope and fear, of longing and triumph, of moments both fragile and powerful. She watched as the billionaire's expression shifted from skepticism to amazement, and she felt a quiet satisfaction knowing that she had reached him. The room, once filled with doubt and expectation, was now silent in reverence, hanging on every note. The final chords approached, and she played them with careful precision, letting each note resonate and linger. When she struck the last key, a hush fell over the room, heavy with awe. For a moment, no one moved or spoke. She sat there, heart pounding, letting the silence wash over her. It was a silence filled not with judgment or expectation, but with pure acknowledgement of what had just occurred. The room was transformed, the atmosphere charged with respect and admiration. Then, gradually, the applause began, starting softly and growing louder, filling the hall with warmth and appreciation. People stood, clapping and cheering, some with tears in their eyes. The billionaire himself stood, clapping with genuine admiration, a rare smile on his face. She realized that she had not just played the piano. She had spoken to the hearts of everyone in the room, and in doing so, she had proven herself in a way that words never could. As the applause continued, she allowed herself a small, quiet smile. The fear, the nerves, the doubt. It had all led to this moment of triumph. She had stepped into a world that felt so far from her own and had made it her own through the language she knew best. She knew that this night would be remembered, not just by the guests or the billionaire, but by her, as the moment when she realized the true power of her music and her courage. After her first notes filled the room, the young pianist stepped back for a brief moment, letting the opening reverberations linger in the air. She felt a rush of energy from the attention of the guests, but with it came a deeper awareness of the stakes. The room was filled with people who were used to power and control, people who could make or break careers with a single comment. The billionaire, sitting slightly apart from the others, continued to watch with an inscrutable expression. She had noticed the subtle twitch of his lips, the faint lift of an eyebrow, and she knew he was still deciding if she was serious or simply a pleasant novelty. Backstage, she had been warned about the sharp tongues at these gatherings. Some people enjoyed testing others, seeing how they reacted under pressure. She could feel their gazes like a physical presence as she adjusted her fingers on the keys again. The whispers of doubt and curiosity floated through the room. Some guests leaned toward each other, quietly sharing opinions. "I wonder if she's ready for this," one said. "It's not easy to play for him," another added. She could hear it, faint but clear enough to remind her that this performance was not just about music. It was about poise, confidence, and proving her worth. As she prepared to continue, she focused on the sound of the piano, letting the music guide her rather than her nerves. Each note had to carry meaning, each pause had to be intentional. She remembered the hours spent practicing in her small apartment, the long nights when the city outside was silent and she poured every emotion into the keys. All of that practice, all of that dedication, was what she had to trust. She could not afford to be distracted by doubt, by the skeptics, by the silent judgment of those who expected her to falter. The performance began again, more confidently this time. The first few measures were delicate, almost tentative, as if she was testing the room. But soon the melody expanded, filling the space with warmth and emotion. The audience began to lean in, their initial skepticism giving way to attention. Some crossed their arms, still cautious, but their eyes followed every movement of her hands. The music was no longer just notes. It was a story, a journey through hope, struggle, and triumph, all told through the piano. She noticed subtle reactions in the crowd. A guest near the back tilted their head, as if trying to catch every nuance. A woman in a shimmering dress blinked rapidly, trying to hold back a tear. The billionaire's expression softened, curiosity overtaking his initial amusement. His smirk had faded slightly, replaced by an almost imperceptible nod. He leaned forward, showing a level of interest that she had not expected. This was more than just performing. It was about connecting, about proving that she belonged in a room where doubt had been the first impression. The whispers had stopped. The guests, once murmuring quietly among themselves, were now silent, absorbed in the music. She could feel the shift in energy. The tension that had filled the room was replaced by a kind of awe, a recognition that something special was happening. She allowed herself a small, private smile, not out of pride, but out of relief. The music was working. It was bridging the gap between expectation and reality, between doubt and belief. The melody grew bolder, more confident. She explored the higher registers of the piano, letting her fingers dance across the keys. Each chord struck resonated through the hall, reaching into the hearts of the listeners. She could sense their emotions shifting, some moved by the beauty, others by the strength of her performance, and many by the raw honesty of the music. The billionaire's attention remained fixed, his gaze steady, absorbing every note. She had expected laughter or mockery, but instead, there was respect and intrigue. She paused for a moment, letting the echo of a powerful chord fill the room. The silence that followed was telling. No one moved, no one spoke. She could feel the collective breath of the audience held in anticipation. This pause was intentional, a way to let the weight of the music settle. She understood that performance was not only about playing fast or loud. It was about timing, emotion, and presence. She felt a connection with each person in the room, even those seated far away, and she played with that awareness, letting the music flow from her to them. As she continued, she noticed a change in the demeanor of some guests. Their posture relaxed, their initial judgment softened. The skeptic at the side of the room now looked intrigued, leaning slightly forward. Another guest, who had been checking their phone, had set it aside, fully engaged. Even those who had initially whispered doubts were now listening intently, their expressions revealing curiosity and respect. She realized that music had a unique power, the ability to dissolve preconceived notions and reach directly into a person's heart. The billionaire finally moved, standing from his seat. It was not the dramatic gesture of mockery she had feared, but a quiet acknowledgement of her talent. He approached slightly, his hands clasped, eyes scanning her fingers with interest. The subtle shift in his demeanor did not go unnoticed by the other guests. Their reactions mirrored his change. Admiration began to ripple through the room. She played with renewed confidence, each note an assertion that her place in this world of wealth and influence was earned through skill and dedication. The music shifted again, becoming more introspective, more delicate. She allowed herself to express vulnerability, knowing that this was part of the story she wanted to tell. It was a reminder that talent was not only about technical ability, but also about emotion and authenticity. She could feel the room responding, the audience leaning in closer to catch every nuance, every subtle shift in tone. The billionaire's eyes softened, his earlier skepticism replaced by genuine appreciation. She continued for what felt like hours, though in reality, it was only a portion of her planned performance. Every movement, every note was deliberate. She let the piano breathe under her hands, allowing the sound to fill every corner of the hall. She was aware of her own heartbeat, the rhythm of the music blending with her pulse. This was more than performance. It was an exchange of energy, a conversation without words between her and the audience. The crescendo approached, and she felt a surge of emotion. The music built, rising like a wave, powerful yet controlled. She could see the anticipation in the eyes of the guests, the way they leaned forward in collective attention. Even the billionaire's expression revealed a rare moment of wonder. She was no longer playing for validation or approval. She was playing to share her soul, to tell a story that words could not capture. And in that moment, she realized that she had won the most important part of the challenge. She had captivated hearts, not just impressed minds. The final notes of the section rang through the hall, and she paused, letting the sound settle like a whisper. Silence filled the space, thick with impact. The audience remained motionless for a heartbeat longer than usual, reluctant to break the spell. She felt a sense of accomplishment, knowing that she had held the room, that she had turned doubt into attention and skepticism into admiration. Her hands rested lightly on the keys, a quiet statement that the music had told its story. Slowly, the room began to respond. Applause started gently, growing steadily until it filled the hall with warmth and celebration. Guests stood, clapping and smiling, some with tears in their eyes. The energy in the room had shifted completely. It was no longer a space of judgment, but one of appreciation and respect. She allowed herself a small, humble bow, feeling the connection between her and the audience deepen. The billionaire approached, offering words of praise that were rare and meaningful. She realized that this night, this performance, had already begun to change perceptions, and perhaps even her future. As she stepped back from the piano, she took a moment to absorb the scene. The guests continued to applaud, moved by the performance they had witnessed. She felt a sense of calm triumph, the tension that had gripped her for weeks finally easing. The journey was not over, but she had proven to herself, and to those watching, that talent, passion, and courage could hold their own even in the most intimidating settings. She knew that the night would linger in memory, a reminder of the power of music to bridge worlds and transform moments. She felt a wave of relief as the applause from her previous section echoed through the grand hall. Yet, she knew this was not the moment to relax. The most challenging part of her performance was still ahead. This was the section that required not just skill but emotional depth, the kind that could move even the hardest hearts. She adjusted her posture, inhaled slowly, and let her fingers hover above the keys. Every note she was about to play would carry a story, one that was personal yet universal, a tale of struggle, hope, and resilience. The guests were watching closely. Some faces were soft with curiosity, others still reserved, their expressions unreadable. She noticed the billionaire observing with a keen focus, his eyes tracing her every movement. The subtle tension in the room was almost tangible, and she welcomed it. It reminded her that this was more than just a performance. It was a challenge, a chance to prove her authenticity and connect on a level that words could never reach. Her hands moved gently across the keys, producing a melody that was tender at first. The notes seemed to float, delicate and precise, creating a fragile atmosphere that captured the attention of every listener. She could feel the audience leaning in, their collective silence amplifying the sound. Each chord she played was deliberate, a conversation with the room, asking them to listen, to feel, and to understand. There was power in the quiet moments as well as the louder ones, and she used both to craft a narrative that unfolded with grace and emotion. As the music deepened, she let herself express vulnerability, a part of her she rarely revealed. She thought of the years she had spent practicing alone, of the moments when doubt and fear had threatened to overwhelm her. Those memories became part of the performance, giving each note weight and meaning. She felt a strange sense of liberation, as if the music was not just hers, but a shared experience with everyone present. The initial skepticism that had hovered over the room began to dissipate, replaced by engagement and emotional resonance. The melody gained strength, moving into a more dynamic section. Her fingers danced across the keys, producing harmonies that were rich and layered. The room responded instinctively. Heads nodded slightly in rhythm, and a few guests closed their eyes, completely absorbed. The billionaire's posture had shifted. He leaned forward slightly, his expression no longer one of bemusement but genuine intrigue. She realized that her ability to tell a story through music was transcending the social barriers in the room, touching something deeper in the listeners. She paused for a brief moment, letting the notes linger in the air. The silence was powerful, and she could feel the room holding its breath in anticipation. This pause was intentional, a chance for the audience to reflect and for the tension to build. When she resumed, the music took on a new intensity. Each note seemed to echo her determination, her belief in herself, and her commitment to the craft she loved. The piano became an extension of her emotions, translating inner thoughts into sound that everyone could feel. The room was completely engaged now. The earlier murmurs of doubt had vanished, replaced by full attention. Guests who had initially appeared indifferent now watched her with fascination. Some were visibly moved, a tear glinting in the corner of an eye. Others sat upright, their hands clenched in silent appreciation. The billionaire's gaze followed every movement, his expression revealing a mix of admiration and surprise. She had challenged his expectations, and the power of her performance was undeniable. She continued to play, flowing seamlessly between tender passages and powerful crescendos. The music was alive, breathing with her emotions, reaching out to touch everyone in the hall. Each transition was deliberate, designed to take the audience on a journey. She noticed the subtle shift in energy, the way the room responded instinctively to changes in tempo and volume. The music had become a language without words, one that spoke directly to the heart and mind. As she reached the climax of the piece, her fingers moved with both precision and abandon. The notes were bold, filled with emotion and conviction. The audience leaned forward collectively, caught in the wave of sound and feeling. The billionaire's eyes glistened slightly under the chandelier lights, a rare indication that he was moved. It was a moment she had imagined countless times, and now, she was living it. The hall felt transformed, no longer just a room of wealth and expectation, but a space of shared humanity and profound connection. She allowed the music to swell, filling the hall with a resonance that seemed almost tangible. Every guest, regardless of their background or preconceived notions, was captivated. She felt the energy of the audience flow back into her performance, a silent dialogue that fueled her expression. She realized that the barriers of judgment and expectation had been dismantled by the simple, honest power of music. It was a moment of triumph not for fame or recognition, but for authenticity and connection. Then, slowly, the music softened, tapering into a delicate and intimate conclusion. Each note was chosen with care, a reflection of the journey she had taken with the audience. The room held its breath, savoring the final moments, as if reluctant to let go of the spell she had cast. Her hands lingered on the keys for an extra beat, allowing the last echoes to fade naturally. The silence afterward was profound, almost sacred, a collective acknowledgement of the experience they had just shared. The applause began gradually, soft at first, then swelling into a heartfelt ovation. Guests rose from their seats, clapping and cheering, some whispering words of admiration to each other. The atmosphere had shifted completely. Where there had been doubt and skepticism, there was now respect, amazement, and genuine appreciation. The billionaire, who had watched with a detached curiosity at first, now approached, clapping steadily, a subtle but sincere smile on his face. She had not only met his expectations but exceeded them in a way that left everyone in the room in awe. As the audience continued to applaud, she allowed herself a moment of quiet satisfaction. The nerves, the doubt, and the anticipation had all led to this moment of shared triumph. She knew that her performance had been more than a demonstration of technical skill. It had been a story, a journey, and a connection with every person present. She realized that the most important part of her success tonight was not the recognition, but the knowledge that she had reached people on a human level, breaking through the walls of skepticism with honesty and talent. The billionaire spoke briefly to her afterward, praising her technique and emotional depth. He mentioned opportunities and connections that could benefit her career, but more importantly, he acknowledged her courage and dedication. The guests around them continued to discuss the performance, many expressing their surprise at the depth and impact of her playing. She understood that this night would be remembered not only by those present but also in the ripple effect it would have on her future opportunities. Stepping away from the piano, she felt a renewed sense of confidence and purpose. The challenges she had faced on her journey to this moment, the long hours of practice, the sacrifices, the moments of self-doubt, had culminated in a performance that proved her worth. She had not only entertained the room but had also touched hearts and changed perceptions. The experience was transformative, a reminder that authenticity and dedication could overcome even the most intimidating obstacles. As the crowd gradually dispersed, she allowed herself to reflect quietly. The room that had seemed so imposing when she first arrived now felt like a place where human connection had triumphed over status and expectation. She had discovered the power of her own voice through the piano, and she knew that this performance would mark a turning point in her life. She carried with her the knowledge that courage, talent, and honesty could silence doubt, captivate hearts, and open doors she had only dreamed of entering. The final segment of her performance began with a sense of calm focus. The audience had been won over by her previous sections, but she knew that true impact required a lasting impression, one that would remain in their minds long after the applause faded. She adjusted her posture, taking a slow, deep breath to steady her nerves. The lights in the grand hall reflected softly off the polished piano, casting a gentle glow over the keys. She felt a mixture of anticipation and serenity, the culmination of all her preparation and effort converging in this moment. The first notes were deliberate, soft but clear, drawing the audience into a quiet space of reflection. She allowed the melody to flow naturally, letting the emotions she had held inside for so long guide her hands. The music was no longer just about technique or showmanship. It was about honesty, vulnerability, and connection. Each note carried a piece of her story, a fragment of the journey that had brought her to this grand hall. The guests leaned in, captivated by the authenticity and depth of the performance. She noticed subtle reactions around the room. A few guests had tears in their eyes, moved by the beauty and sincerity of the music. Others sat in silent admiration, fully absorbed in the sound. Even the billionaire, who had initially appeared skeptical, was now fully engaged, his expression reflecting surprise, respect, and a touch of wonder. He had expected entertainment, perhaps even a joke, but he was witnessing something far more powerful. A young artist commanding the room with nothing but her music. As she played, the melody grew in complexity, weaving together gentle passages with more dramatic flourishes. Her fingers moved with confidence and precision, yet there was an undeniable softness, an emotional depth that made each chord resonate on a personal level with every listener. She could sense the energy in the room shifting, the earlier tension transforming into a shared experience of awe and appreciation. The music created a bridge between herself and the audience, a silent conversation that transcended words. She paused briefly, allowing the last note to linger in the air, its resonance filling the space. The silence that followed was powerful, almost reverent. For a heartbeat, no one moved or spoke. The room was captivated, holding on to the lingering echoes, as if collectively recognizing the significance of what had just unfolded. She felt a quiet satisfaction, knowing that the audience had been drawn into the world she was creating through sound. Then, with a subtle shift in tempo and tone, she moved into the final section of her performance. The music became more expansive, bold yet controlled, drawing the audience further into the emotional journey. The guests leaned forward instinctively, their eyes fixed on her hands and the piano. She could feel the intensity of their attention, the collective focus that had built throughout the evening reaching its peak. The billionaire watched with rapt attention, his usual composure replaced by genuine engagement. The melody climbed, weaving through highs and lows with a fluidity that seemed effortless. Each note was intentional, crafted to evoke emotion and reflection. She allowed herself to become fully immersed, letting the music carry her and the audience together through a landscape of feeling and expression. The hall seemed to pulse with the energy of the performance, the sound resonating through every corner, touching hearts in a profound way. She reached the climactic passage, her fingers dancing across the keys with precision and passion. The room felt suspended in time, as if every guest had been transported into the music itself. The billionaire's eyes reflected a rare vulnerability, a subtle acknowledgement of the power she held over the atmosphere of the room. She had transformed doubt into admiration, skepticism into awe, and in that moment, the boundaries of social status and expectation dissolved under the weight of her talent. As the music approached its conclusion, she gradually softened the tempo, guiding the audience gently toward the final moments. Each note was carefully considered, allowing the melody to breathe and linger. She felt the presence of every listener, their emotions entwined with the music, creating a profound sense of shared experience. This was not just a performance. It was a connection, a moment in which every person in the hall was part of a larger story. The last note rang out, delicate yet powerful, and she held her hands lightly above the keys, letting the sound fade naturally. The room was silent for a moment, as if collectively absorbing the impact of what had just occurred. She looked around and saw the expressions of the audience, the mixture of admiration, surprise, and heartfelt appreciation. The billionaire, standing slightly apart, allowed a slow, genuine smile to spread across his face. He had expected a joke, a light-hearted diversion, but instead, he had witnessed the transformative power of music. Gradually, the applause began, first softly, then growing into a full, resounding ovation. Guests rose to their feet, clapping and cheering, some with tears glistening in their eyes. The energy in the room was electric, a testament to the profound effect of her performance. She allowed herself a small bow, acknowledging their appreciation without arrogance, grateful for the connection she had forged. The applause continued, a wave of affirmation and respect that seemed to wash over her, filling her with a sense of accomplishment and joy. The billionaire approached after the applause subsided, his steps measured and deliberate. He extended a hand, not only in recognition of her skill but also in respect for the courage and authenticity she had displayed. His words were sincere, praising her technique, emotional depth, and ability to engage the audience. He mentioned possibilities for mentorship, future opportunities, and connections that could help advance her career, but more importantly, he acknowledged the personal impact of her performance on the guests and himself. The other guests continued to express their admiration, sharing whispers of amazement and appreciation. Some approached to compliment her directly, others lingered to discuss the intricacies and emotional resonance of her performance. She realized that her music had not only captivated the room but had also left a lasting impression on everyone present. The evening had transformed from a test of skill into a celebration of talent, emotion, and human connection. Stepping away from the piano, she felt a sense of quiet triumph. The fear and tension that had accompanied her arrival had been replaced by a profound satisfaction. She had met the challenge of the evening, not by seeking approval, but by remaining true to herself and her art. The experience reinforced her belief that authenticity, dedication, and courage could overcome even the most intimidating obstacles. She had touched hearts, changed perceptions, and proven to herself that her music had the power to connect and inspire. As the hall gradually emptied, she took a moment to reflect on the journey she had undertaken to reach this point. The years of practice, the sacrifices, the moments of doubt, and the persistent pursuit of excellence had all culminated in a performance that was both technically impressive and emotionally profound. She understood that the true value of this night lay not only in the recognition she received, but also in the confirmation of her own abilities and the lasting impact of her music on those who had listened. The lights dimmed, and the staff began to tidy the grand hall. She lingered for a moment, taking in the space that had witnessed a remarkable transformation. What had begun as a room of expectation, judgment, and doubt had become a place of shared humanity, emotional resonance, and mutual respect. The performance had bridged social divides, silenced skepticism, and allowed the purity of music to shine through. She left the stage with a heart full of gratitude, aware that this night would be remembered for the rest of her life as a turning point, a testament to the power of talent, perseverance, and authenticity. The applause had finally begun to fade, but the energy in the grand hall remained palpable. Guests continued to talk quietly among themselves, sharing their impressions and marveling at the depth of her performance. Some lingered near the piano, asking questions about her training, her inspirations, and the pieces she had chosen. She smiled warmly, answering each with grace, but inside, she felt a mixture of relief and exhilaration. This night had been more than a performance. It had been a declaration of her passion, dedication, and belief in herself. The billionaire approached again, this time with a more relaxed demeanor. He complimented her skill, but he also spoke about the courage it took to perform under such pressure. He admitted that he had expected a light-hearted performance, perhaps even a humorous misstep, but she had exceeded every expectation. His words carried weight not only because of his influence, but because they were genuine. She could sense that he recognized her talent and respected her character. This acknowledgement was different from praise. It was validation that her years of practice and perseverance had been worthwhile. The young pianist realized that the experience had changed her in ways beyond career opportunities. She had faced fear, scrutiny, and high expectations and had risen to the occasion. It was a reminder that growth often happens in the most intimidating moments. She thought of the countless evenings spent alone at the piano, the sacrifices she had made, and the determination that had fueled her. All of those pieces of her life had led to this night, and she now felt a deeper confidence in herself and her abilities. Guests continued to approach her, some with expressions of awe, others with curiosity. They asked about her background, her inspirations, and the journey that had brought her to this hall. She spoke honestly, sharing stories of late nights practicing in her small apartment, the challenges she had faced, and the moments that had inspired her to keep going. The audience listened intently, many nodding in understanding and admiration. They saw not just a performer, but a person who had dedicated herself to her craft and had found a way to connect with others through it. The billionaire suggested that she consider opportunities beyond this event, mentioning connections and programs that could help her grow as a musician. He encouraged her to continue performing, to share her music with wider audiences, and to embrace the recognition she deserved. While the offer was significant, what resonated more was his acknowledgement of her talent and potential. She realized that this night had created a bridge to possibilities she had only dreamed of, but it had also affirmed the value of her perseverance and passion. As the evening drew to a close, the pianist found a quiet corner to reflect. She looked around the hall, now emptied of most guests, and thought about the transformation she had witnessed, not just within herself, but in the reactions of those who had listened. The room that had seemed intimidating when she arrived now felt like a space of shared experience, respect, and admiration. She realized that music had the power to transcend status, wealth, and expectation, connecting people in a way that words alone could not. She thought about the billionaire, who had expected entertainment or a joke, and how her performance had silenced the room, changing perceptions in an instant. It was a reminder that talent and authenticity often speak louder than assumptions or preconceived notions. The realization filled her with quiet satisfaction. She had not only played for an audience but had shared a piece of herself, and the impact was undeniable. The experience reinforced her belief in the power of dedication, courage, and honesty in every pursuit. Walking out of the mansion into the night, she felt a sense of accomplishment and anticipation. The city streets, illuminated by streetlights and the distant glow of traffic, felt different somehow. She had stepped into a world that once seemed distant and intimidating and had emerged with confidence, recognition, and inspiration. She knew that this night would be remembered not just as a performance, but as a turning point, a moment when her life and career could begin to expand in new directions. In the days that followed, the performance became a topic of discussion among influential circles. Invitations, messages, and opportunities began to arrive, all sparked by the impact of that night. She remained grounded, remembering the emotions and lessons she had experienced during the performance. She continued practicing, knowing that talent alone was not enough, and that dedication and growth were essential to sustaining success. Each note she played carried the memory of the night, the lessons learned, and the confidence gained. The young pianist also reflected on the deeper meaning of the experience. It was not just about impressing a wealthy or influential audience. It was about proving to herself that she could face challenges, embrace fear, and rise above expectations. She realized that courage was not the absence of fear, but the choice to act despite it. That night had shown her that she had the strength, talent, and resilience to navigate the path ahead, no matter how uncertain or demanding. Over time, she performed in more venues, connecting with audiences from all walks of life. Each performance was infused with the authenticity and emotional depth she had demonstrated that night. The recognition she received opened doors, but she remained focused on her love for music and the joy of sharing it with others. The experience with the Billionaire and the Grand Hall had become a reference point, a reminder that true impact comes from sincerity, dedication, and courage. She also thought about the people who had doubted her, who had whispered and wondered if she was ready. The night had transformed their skepticism into respect, and she carried that lesson forward. She understood that judgment was inevitable, but the choice to remain true to oneself and to pursue excellence could change perceptions and create opportunities. It was a lesson that extended beyond music and into every aspect of life. As her career progressed, she never forgot the feeling of silencing the room, of transforming doubt into admiration, and of connecting with people on a profound emotional level. That night remained a cornerstone memory, a reminder of what could be achieved with passion, persistence, and authenticity. She approached each new opportunity with the confidence and insight gained from the experience, knowing that talent, when paired with courage and sincerity, could create lasting impact. In the end, the young pianist realized that the performance had been more than a single event. It had been a milestone, a personal triumph, and a source of inspiration. She had faced a challenging audience, exceeded expectations, and shared a piece of herself that resonated deeply with everyone present. The experience had shaped her approach to music, to performance, and to life, leaving her with a sense of purpose and fulfillment that would guide her future endeavors. It was a night that transformed not only her career, but also her understanding of the power of dedication, authenticity, and human connection.